Why men won't approach women anymore. Watch and know why men won't approach women anymore.
Have you noticed this quiet shift? The one no one is really talking about, but everyone can feel? It's unfolding in the most ordinary places. City sidewalks, cafés, malls, gyms, spaces where human connection once moved effortlessly. An attractive woman walks by. In another time, that moment would have sparked something natural. A brief glance, a soft smile, maybe a confident hello, a simple human exchange. But now, nothing happens. Men don't turn their heads. They don't smile. They don't engage. Their eyes stay forward. Their expressions remain neutral. Their energy is contained, almost guarded, as if even acknowledging her presence comes with a cost they're no longer willing to pay. And here's the part most people get wrong. This has nothing to do with men becoming weak. It isn't insecurity. It isn't a lack of confidence. It's restraint, a quiet recalibration. Many men have learned through experience, not ideology, that attention is no longer a harmless gesture. What once felt like confidence now feels risky. What once felt respectful can be misread. So instead of leaning in, they step back. Instead of engaging, they observe. Instead of reacting, they conserve. Psychologically, this is a form of self-protection. When social rules become unclear, people don't become reckless, they become cautious. And caution often looks like indifference from the outside. But beneath that calm exterior is awareness, calculation, a man deciding where his energy is worth spending and where it isn't. This isn't the death of attraction. It's the rise of selectivity. So here's the real question. Have you noticed this shift too? Have you seen men pull back? Or felt yourself doing the same? Write your thoughts in the comment box. I'm curious to know what you've observed. It's because they've learned what a single approach can cost in the modern world. A cost that's unpredictable. A cost that's often disproportionate. A cost so severe that silence becomes the most intelligent option. For generations, men were taught that initiating was their role. That confidence meant stepping forward. That masculinity required taking the first move. It was considered a rite of passage. But the environment men are navigating today is nothing like the one their fathers grew up in, and it's worlds apart from what their grandfathers experienced. Back then, a man could approach respectfully, misread a signal, receive a polite rejection, and walk away unchanged. No damage, no consequences. His dignity stayed intact, his reputation untouched. The moment simply faded into memory. Today, that same interaction can spiral into a public incident within minutes. What once ended quietly can now become a spectacle. A woman's discomfort, real, imagined, or amplified, can trigger a chain reaction that dismantles a man's image, threatens his career, damages his social standing, and fractures his sense of self. Men didn't suddenly lose interest in connection. They didn't wake up one day indifferent to women. They watched the ground shift beneath them. They saw ordinary interactions turn into social landmines. They watched stories spread online. Stories where a harmless greeting became a viral accusation, where a short clip stripped of context labeled a man for life. They saw average men, not criminals, not predators, turned into cautionary tales simply because they spoke to a woman at the wrong moment, in the wrong tone, or with the wrong appearance. Over time, men adapted the same instinct that stops you from touching fire after you've been burned. Approach her and you risk your peace. Approach her and you risk your reputation. Approach her and you risk being cast as the villain in a story you never agreed to be part of. There's a moment men experience now that earlier generations never had to face. It happens in a split second, right between impulse and action. A man notices a woman he finds interesting. Instinct nudges him forward. But almost immediately, another voice takes over. What if she reacts loudly? What if she calls him creepy so others can hear? What if she pulls out her phone and starts recording? What if the clip goes online without context? What if someone from work sees it? What if this single, respectful interaction becomes a label he can't escape? These scenarios play out instantly in his mind, and the conclusion is always the same. Stay quiet, keep moving, protect yourself. Some people call this fear, but fear isn't the right word. Fear is irrational. This isn't. This is calculation. This is pattern recognition. This is an entire generation of men realizing that modern dating has become a battlefield where the rules are unclear, the penalties are extreme, and the protection is non-existent. A man can do everything right and still lose. He can be respectful and still be framed as a threat. He can be polite and still be publicly humiliated. After witnessing enough examples, approaching no longer feels casual or hopeful. It feels like stepping toward a suspicious sound in the dark. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it changes your life forever. This is the reality men inherited. A world where the risk of making the first move often outweighs the reward for doing it well. So men stepped back, slowly, logically, not because they stopped caring, not because they rejected connection, but because they understood that their dignity, their peace, and sometimes their livelihood weren't worth gambling on a stranger's interpretation. Walk through public spaces with awareness and you'll notice another uncomfortable truth. Women still expect to be approached. They still complain that men don't initiate. They still say confidence is attractive and initiative matters. Yet many of those same women respond to male attention with suspicion, hostility, or exaggerated disgust, as if a man's interest is an insult unless he fits an increasingly narrow and unrealistic standard. This contradiction cuts deep into the modern male psyche. Men are told to approach, then punished for doing so, unless they're already the kind of man who never needed to approach in the first place. It's a trap disguised as advice, and men have learned to walk around it. The reality is that women today hold more leverage than any generation before them, and that power is often exercised without understanding its long-term effects. Validation floods in endlessly. Likes, messages, comments, swipes, follows. Many receive more attention before breakfast than entire communities of women once did in a lifetime. When validation is constant, the man standing in front of her begins to feel unnecessary, almost intrusive. Digital attention becomes the primary measure of desirability. Real-world interaction fades into background noise. Men in front of her aren't seen as people. They're interruptions to a steady stream of dopamine. And men sense this immediately. The distracted eyes, the half-listening responses, the fingers still hovering over a screen. Today, a man isn't competing with other men. He's competing with a digital ecosystem designed to flatter, stimulate, and never challenge her. You can't compete with something that never rejects her, never demands growth, and never asks her to reflect. So many men stop trying. Then comes the next layer, not from all women, but from enough to establish a pattern. Approaches met with theatrics, eye rolls, loud sighs, sarcastic rejections delivered for an audience. Reactions crafted not just to say no, but to embarrass. These aren't simple rejections. They're performances. And when culture rewards these moments with likes, views, and validation, the risk rises again. Imagine witnessing this repeatedly, watching men punished for what used to be normal human behavior, seeing respectful introductions transformed into viral clips labeled creepy for no reason beyond appearance. After enough of that, approaching doesn't feel confident anymore. Feels reckless, like gambling in a rigged game where the house always wins, the rules change mid-play, and the losses are public. And there's one final truth that rarely gets acknowledged because it exposes the imbalance. The exact same approach is welcomed from one man and condemned from another, based purely on how attractive he is. That reality alone explains why silence has become the default. Men have felt this truth instinctively for a long time, but only recently has it become impossible to ignore. Now it's said out loud. Women joke about it openly, posting videos and laughing as they explain that it's only creepy if the man isn't attractive. It's framed as humor, as harmless honesty. But men don't hear it as a joke. They hear the meaning underneath it. They hear that intention is irrelevant. Character doesn't count. Respectful behavior offers no protection. What matters is genetic fortune and visible status. That single filter decides whether you're seen as charming or threatening. For any man not born into the top tier, it's a brutal realization. So the rational response isn't rage. It isn't denial. It's adaptation. Men pull back. They choose silence instead of scrutiny. They choose self-preservation over forced confidence. They choose dignity rather than public embarrassment. And slowly, something else becomes clear. Life doesn't fall apart when you stop approaching strangers. In fact, it keeps moving smoothly. Calm sets in. Peace becomes familiar. And once a man experiences that peace, the idea of risking it for someone who could turn a moment into a spectacle starts to feel irrational. This is the quiet shift happening right now. Not driven by anger. Not powered by resentment. It's driven by clarity. A psychological transition is taking place inside modern men. One that rarely gets discussed, yet shapes everything. It's the understanding that the emotional cost of approaching today compounds over time. One rejection doesn't matter. Even 10 don't define you. But dozens, layered with ridicule, judgment, and the constant threat of being labeled something permanent and dark, those add up. That accumulation becomes erosion. You don't notice it at first. But eventually something gives. Not courage. Not masculinity. What breaks is the willingness to keep offering vulnerability to a system that punishes effort. Men describe it as burnout, as exhaustion, as approach fatigue. It's not the rejection itself that drains them. It's the emotional bruising that stacks with every interaction. A single bruise is manageable, but hit the same spot again and again, day after day, and eventually it becomes untouchable. That's what modern dating feels like for many men. Not because they're fragile, but because no human being can absorb endless psychological pressure without choosing another route. And that choice is rarely dramatic. It happens quietly. A man tells himself he'll try again later. Next week becomes next month. Next month becomes someday. And without noticing, he stops entirely. His energy shifts elsewhere, into work, into fitness, into skills, into solitude. Then something unexpected happens. He finds peace. Not temporary relief, but real calm. The kind he hasn't felt in years. In that space, no one is evaluating him. No one is mocking him. No one is misinterpreting his kindness. No one is measuring him against invisible standards he can't meet. No one is punishing him for not being tall enough, rich enough, handsome enough, or socially flawless. This is the part modern culture avoids admitting. Men didn't walk away because they hate women. They walked away because they value feeling safe in their own skin. They stepped back because the dating environment turned into an arena where everything they do is wrong. Unless they already meet criteria they were never allowed to choose. Every attempt felt like walking into a storm where the outcome was predetermined, and the blame always landed on them. Beneath all of this sits a truth that shatters the old narrative. Men today are more self-aware than ever before. They understand perception. They know how quickly situations escalate. They know that a woman's interpretation often carries more social weight than their actual intent. They know a single accusation, even a false one, can leave a permanent mark. They know social media doesn't forgive. Workplaces don't always investigate fairly. And society doesn't rush to protect them. So they adapt the only way a rational person would in the face of unpredictable danger. They reduce exposure. They control what they can. They avoid environments where suspicion is automatic. They speak less, risk less, engage less. And despite what some believe, this isn't fear. Fear is irrational. This is calculated restraint. It's survival instinct applied to a modern world where the threats aren't physical, but reputational, emotional, and psychological. The irony is that many women misread this entirely. They see men avoiding eye contact and assume indifference. They see men walking past without a word and assume insecurity. They see men keeping to themselves and label them cold, antisocial, or emotionally unavailable. The reality is far more uncomfortable. Men care deeply. They care enough about their futures, their stability, and their dignity to avoid a system that penalizes them for participation. And once you grasp the psychological weight behind that choice, the landscape becomes clear. This isn't a generation of weak men. It's a generation of men pushed into silence by a marketplace that no longer values the effort they once gave freely. And there's another layer beneath the exhaustion and hostility, one that cuts even deeper. It's the collapse of reciprocity. For most of history, approaching wasn't a one-sided gamble. It was shared risk. Women understood the courage it took. Even when uninterested, they responded with grace because they recognized the vulnerability involved. That mutual understanding has largely vanished. Today, men carry the risk. They carry the responsibility. They absorb the fallout. Women carry none of it. And when one side bears all the cost while the other holds all the power, the system fractures. Consider what men are expected to manage. They must initiate, yet somehow predict her mood, her past experiences, her boundaries, her sensitivities, her expectations, all without a single word of guidance. He enters blind while she controls the narrative. If she's attracted, the story becomes romantic. If she isn't, it becomes threatening. He doesn't choose the category. She does. And every man understands this reality. This imbalance hasn't just changed dating. It's altered the psychology of connection itself. Men have learned that behavior is no longer judged objectively. It's filtered entirely through emotional interpretation. Attraction turns boldness into charm. Indifference turns the same act into annoyance. Irritation transforms it into danger. Same words, same tone, same respect, completely different outcomes. That's the roulette men are navigating, where reward or punishment has little to do with actions and everything to do with perception in a single moment. And this is where the deepest disillusionment takes root. Men are coming to a hard realization. Authenticity no longer carries weight. Character doesn't protect you anymore. Even good intentions have lost their value. A man can be intelligent, respectful, stable, emotionally balanced, and still be dismissed instantly simply because he doesn't match a certain visual preference. At the same time, another man, reckless in behavior and shallow in substance, can bypass all scrutiny effortlessly just because he fits an idealized image of desirability. When men observe this pattern long enough, a simple conclusion forms. If the outcome hinges on factors they cannot control, why invest effort at all? This realization cuts even deeper when they compare it with what women say they want. Modern women often demand effort, leadership, confidence, and initiative. Yet rarely do they acknowledge the cost of those traits, because every one of them requires exposure to judgment. Confidence isn't a button you press without consequence. It requires vulnerability. It demands risk. And in an environment where that risk is frequently weaponized, confidence stops being an asset and starts becoming a liability. So when a man chooses not to approach, he isn't rejecting confidence. He's refusing to step into a situation where confidence can be twisted into arrogance, aggression, or entitlement. But perhaps the most sobering realization of all is this: men are no longer necessary in the way they once were. Technology has replaced interaction. Social media has replaced validation. Dating apps have replaced organic connection. And within this new ecosystem, men are valued only when they entertain or provide material benefit. They're no longer seen as potential partners. They're treated as options, sorted, filtered, and discarded with efficiency. Men see how easily they can be replaced. They see how cheaply their effort is priced. They feel how transactional the entire process has become. and something inside them hardens, not into resentment but into detachment. They stop chasing because chasing no longer leads anywhere meaningful. They stop approaching because the act itself has lost its dignity. They exit the game because the game stopped rewarding sincerity, effort, and decency. And within that silence lies a truth society isn't ready to confront. Men didn't vanish. They didn't lose confidence. They didn't fall behind. They walked away from a marketplace that stopped valuing what once made connection real. And beneath all of this is a final truth that reshapes everything once a man finally sees it clearly. Men didn't pull back because they hate companionship. Not because they fear connection. Not because they're lazy or incapable of effort. They stepped back because they discovered something transformative. Their lives don't collapse without constant pursuit. In fact, many men experience the opposite. Without the pressure of modern dating, they sleep better. They focus deeper. Their thinking sharpens. Their bodies grow stronger. Their discipline returns. They build skills, careers, businesses, communities. They reclaim time, energy, and mental space once spent trying to impress people who barely acknowledged them. This shift creates something rare: internal wealth, emotional stability, direction, clarity, things dating rarely provided. Men begin to realize that peace isn't a temporary break. It's a way of life. And once a man tastes that lifestyle, the idea of returning to a dating environment filled with hostility, inconsistency, and impossible standards feels offensive to his spirit. He recognizes the emotional tax he once paid and refuses to pay it again. But the ripple effects go far beyond individual men. Women now ask where all the good men went, confused by the absence of genuine interest. Yet the explanation is brutally simple. You cannot shame men for years, label them creepy for trying, belittle them for failing, mock them for vulnerability, attack them for being average, ridicule them for being respectful, and then expect those same men to eagerly participate in a system that never respected them. Respect must go both ways. Appreciation has to be mutual. Effort has to be shared. The modern dating market offers none of this to the average man. Men didn't create this environment. They adjusted to it. They didn't destroy the dating market. They responded to its collapse. They didn't become unavailable. They became self-protective. Every withdrawal was logical. Every step back was earned in a world that treated good intentions as threats and presence as a burden. And now, in the quiet men have chosen, women are beginning to realize something culture never told them. Men were the foundation all along. Men were the initiators. Men carried the courage that allowed relationships to exist at all. Remove that backbone and the structure collapses. Dating didn't fall apart because men stopped approaching. Men stopped approaching because dating had already fallen apart. What remains now isn't a battlefield. It's an empty stage. Women are waiting for a performance men have already walked away from. Society is waiting for a script that can no longer exist under the current rules. And here's the most unfiltered truth of all. Men are not coming back until something fundamental changes. Not until respect replaces contempt. Not until humility replaces entitlement. Not until attraction is understood as a mutual exchange, not a reward handed down from above. Men are done chasing approval from people who treat them like intruders. Done trading dignity for validation. Done playing a game that punishes them simply for being men. Instead, they've found something better beyond the chase. A life built on purpose, on inner strength, on peace, on self-respect. And once a man truly finds himself, he becomes unreachable by a system designed to undervalue him. If you've stayed until this moment and felt something click, don't ignore it. Share this message. Men need to know they aren't broken, that their silence is rational, that their withdrawal isn't weakness, it's evolution. And women need to hear what society keeps avoiding. You cannot demand effort while offering hostility in return. If this message resonated, support it. Like the video, Leave your honest thoughts in the comments. I read them. Share this with someone who needs clarity. And subscribe to Epic Persona for more conversations that speak plainly, without apology.